Growing up in Turkey, I always had an anti-Western intervention attitude because I saw the impact of what America was doing in the region. But it wasn't until I came to the United States of America where I realized that I was living in a country in Turkey where there was at least some robust social safety nets in spite of the country's overall poverty in comparison to the United States. The radicalizing moment for me was the first hospital bill that I got, and that's, I think, when I realized, like, yeah, I was already against American intervention overseas, but I did not understand the importance or the necessity of social safety nets, uh, uh, things such as healthcare that I was basically taking for granted until it was taken away from me. And I think this is a very common experience for a lot of people that come to America. We watch a lot of American television growing up. We love America. We think American culture is amazing. And then those of us who are fortunate enough to actually come to the United States of America very quickly realize that it's not as great as things are presented on TV. We oftentimes in the West will look at state media broadcasters like the Chinese state media. Will say, "Oh my God, they're so biased," and yet um, it's every state has its own version of the exact same thing. In the Western world, I would say some countries have state media, and then they also have independent private media. But the independent private media is still very much invested in normalizing the cruelty that you experience. We're seeing that with even like the ICE shooting that just recently took place, and the mass protests and mass mobilizations that are happening. But then also, yes, externally, there is this broad vision of America, this non-representative ideal of America, the land of freedom and prosperity that is presented to the rest of the world through not only mainstream outlets but also through Hollywood as well. And this is a part of the soft power initiatives that America has obviously crafted expertly. A lot of people living in liberal societies don't even realize that they're being propagandized against because they've so internalized everything that they're seeing as the simple objective reality. And that, to me, has created this unique moment of crisis now, with instances that basically break that consensus reality that the media has been able to hold together. That causes people to lose faith in mainstream outlets, which I don't necessarily think is a positive thing either, because in that new democratized world of the media that I am a part of as well, there are plenty of bad faith actors that are simply using this anarchist information landscape to keep fomenting dangerous racialized propaganda. So that credibility of mainstream news is falling apart because Trump oftentimes is saying the quiet part out loud, whether it be intervention in Venezuela and the real reasons for it, or whether it be credibility lost because of their endless need to defend the interests of the American State Department, which is heavily aligned with the interests of the state of Israel in conducting a genocide. Why do people love Zohran Mamdani but might be critical of someone like myself, regardless of the similarities in our ideology? Well, he's a politician, so of course he's a lot more careful and a lot more optically sound, and has a way with moderating his commentary in a way that is suitable for liberal audiences. That's number one. My job, on the other hand, is to snap liberals out of this reality that they have deluded themselves into believing that liberalism is not failing actually, and that this is the only pathway forward. So we play very different roles in that regard. As far as the rest of the left goes, I mean, yeah, that's just how it is. People have had historically have always had ideological delineations that they make massive, that create massive tensions in every anti-capitalist movement historically. Anarchists against Marxist-Leninists, anarchists, Bolsheviks, Mensheviks. Historically, there's always been different ideological delineations where people argue endlessly, post endlessly. The old version of that I assume is just like pamphlets or writing letters to one another, critiquing one another with regular frequency. So it's a very common thing. I try to bring everybody under this singular banner to the best of my ability, but there's always going to be issues with that. But it is what it is. I always say, look, as long as you're on the right side of these issues, as long as you put empathy first, as long as you put people first, with your worldview, and you fight back against cruelty, cruel systems, systems of oppression, capitalism, racism, patriarchy, and different forms of repression. As long as you're fighting back against that, then it's fine. You don't have to like me, but we're still on the same side.
What are your thoughts on socialism with Chinese characteristics? How do you see it different from the democratic socialism that Zoran Mamdani does, or what what your ideology does it align with what you believe?
I see socialism as an understandable evolution away from capitalism, as capitalism was an evolution away from feudalism and monarchies, right? Liberal democracy, in the way that people presented it, this philosophical endeavor was certainly worthwhile. I think that there was a lot of benefits to capitalism over the previous formations. Having said that, it's very clearly run its course. And I see socialism as an evolution. And there have been numerous attempts at implementing a socialist transitional state. And I think the Chinese version is successful because it has survived. So that's the way I see it. It's very obvious to me that, China has taken a close watch on the failures and the successes of the USSR. Whether it be ideological delineations every now and then, or what caused the Sino-Soviet split initially, or maintaining some rigid party discipline throughout this entire process. But ultimately, it's like socialism at its root is supposed to be improving the material conditions of the working class. And China has been able to do that very effectively and very successfully in a way that is even cutting through the American propaganda at this point. So are there issues? Are there differences in opinion that I have in terms of like how the state operates? Yes. But I'm also not as audacious as to say I know better than the 1 million communists that are a part of the party that are actively trying to make their country the best version it can be, and moving in a direction that is that has been simply more efficient in improving people's lives than the American government is. So that's the way I look at it. I'm very agnostic about these attempts, or at least my assessment. I just look at the results in general.
So when you decided to go to China for the first time, I think that was the first time that you went last year. Is that
Yes.
correct? What was the ideological and even political motivation to visit China? Did the coverage align with what your motivation was?
Um, I guess it aligns with my motivations, because my motivation is to show that we are all united as a people, regardless of whichever nation state we're from, and that people's differences should be celebrated, and that all men are brothers at the end of the day. So, in that regard, I wanted to show my audience that China wasn't this like North Korean style. I mean, even the DPRK is obviously heavily propagandized against, but like China is not this hermit kingdom in the way that the Western media has presented it. That it's actually developed tremendously. It's actually yielded tremendous prosperity for its own citizens, contrary to the false notions that people might have developed about China. So in that regard, I think I saw a lot of successes. As far as the Western media coverage on it, it's very interesting. I mean, there were some journalists who reached out, journalists who have either lived in China or have been on the China beat at a certain point, that have a better assessment of how China has developed, were much kinder towards my understanding of what modern China looks like. But then there was also the Newsweek articles and the articles about like, oh, he got stopped at Tiananmen Square. He was arrested. He's in prison now. It's like for over a 2-minute conversation that I had with an overzealous young police officer at Tiananmen Square who saw, a white guy, and he thought this white guy was like making a mockery over this like important event in a very important place for a lot of Chinese people. That wasn't the case. It didn't turn into anything, but the way that the Western media covered it was like, well, here it is. Like, this is China, you know, and it's additionally funny from my perspective because I've been detained in worse ways by my own government, the American government, as I was entering the country in the past. So, and I've also been shot at by American police. I've been arrested. I've been, I've been on the receiving end of stun grenades at protests and things like that. So, like my treatment by the American police have been far worse than the brief, 2-minute conversation that I had with that Chinese cop at Tiananmen Square, and yet the coverage of it was like, this is how China actually is. But in any case, as far as like the coverage goes from the Chinese state media, I think they're very excited at the prospect of having Westerners have an open mind to what China actually looks like, and I totally get that. I totally understand that. Why wouldn't they be positive towards that sort of thing? All they've seen, for the most part, is a lot of animosity towards not only the government but really the people as well, and a lot of falsehoods being spread.
Do you think that your trip kind of transformed or was seen as something that China can use as soft power? And how do you distinguish between personal observation and normalization of Chinese propaganda?
Um, so I think that there are things that I saw and I experienced that I talked about there that isn't necessarily propaganda, it's just the truth, right? Like it's not when I go there and I'm like, look at how cool high speed rail is. That's not, you can say, or people might say this is Chinese propaganda, but it's also the truth, right? Or you can look at the tier one cities, both official and also unofficial tier one cities, and how well they've developed over the years. Like when I was in Shanghai, I was staying in what's the side? Not the Bund side, but the Pudong, I think.
Yes.
Like when I was in Shanghai, I was in Pudong. Like the hotel that I was staying at was built on top of like swampland 25 years ago. Like that's impossible not to recognize. It does it make China look good? Sure, it does, but also it's the truth, right? So in that regard, I do think that if there's like a soft power capacity there, it's not born out of my interest in doing propaganda for the Chinese state, but more so just the broad recognition that is, I think, worthy of any government that has been able to improve the lives of its own citizens. And as far as like my own personal experiences where I felt surveilled or anything like that, or even held back or engaged in any sort of like self-censorship, I didn't necessarily do that too much. I mean, I did talk about the rule that I gathered from talking to Chinese people, both on camera and off camera, is that as long as you don't talk about the party in like in the ways that Americans are comfortable talking about their leaders, as long as you don't talk about Xi Jinping or Mao Zedong in a way that is seen as disrespectful, you can make criticisms about things that are happening, things that are going on. I personally have thought about this and talked about this quite extensively, both when I was in China and certainly after I left China, where like from my worldview, that kind of social libertarianism is something that I grew up with, something that I actually want, something that I find to be good, something that I think is overall healthy. And that does not exist in China. But I don't think that is the most consequential thing that a government can do in terms of like repressing its citizens. I think like the economic repression of having all of this bounty, having all of this wealth, and not offering any of that prosperity in the form of improving literacy, in the form of like building rural hospitals in the same way that we see in America. I think that is a far more consequential form of oppression than the types of repression that I encountered or experienced in any capacity.
Mm-hmm. Didn't you feel like the Tiananmen incident was some way contradictory to your political beliefs or the ideas of liberty that you vouch for?
As far as being stopped by a cop who, even in spite of the language barrier, we were able to like talk to, but the surveillance aspect of it, yeah, of course. The surveillance aspect of it, and the attitude, the immediate attitude, or like the reflexive attitude that people have in that situation, a person with position with some power over me in a foreign country. In that moment, I chalked it up to cultural differences for the most part. I saw that as like someone being overzealous
Mhm.
and assuming that I'm there to like do some kind of mockery. Um, and I broadly try to respect the culture and the countries that I go and visit, even though I try to not make American tourists look horrible all around the world in the way that we're normally in the way that we do unintentionally. um Having said that, like that is certainly something that I would not be able to do what I'm doing in America in China. Of course I would not be able to run around and uh, I mean, I called Donald Trump a pedophile for his protection over the Jeffrey Epstein the files, right? Like the Department of Justice is running cover for Jeffrey Epstein, an international sex trafficker of minors who is connected to a lot of American and international global elites. I would not be able to, in a similar circumstance, address those things if those things existed internally in China, right? I know that. And that is something that I do consider. So I see the good and the bad.
Did you feel like you were self-censoring yourself at some point?
Not necessarily. I did see the reaction from Chinese people around me when I would talk about Xi Jinping, like when I would bring up Xi Jinping's name at all, or Mao Zedong. That definitely was interesting to experience, where a lot of people were like, "Oh, don't say that," right, or "Don't do that." Where I still did because I'm an American tourist, and but it wasn't making fun, making a mockery of either of these figures. Like these are uh, complicated historical figures that are responsible for the modern Chinese state and the way that it exists currently. And I clearly do like the People's Republic of China. So I think that it's the heavy-handed nature of social repression that comes from states oftentimes is a byproduct, at least from my assessment, a byproduct of having to consistently deal with interference from the West that wants to destabilize these countries. I see that. I understand that. I don't personally appreciate it. I don't like it, but
Don't
I,
you
I
feel
understand
that,
why it exists.
don't you feel this is a different type of social contract between the people and the government? Every country has a different social
Oh,
contract.
absolutely. Yeah. So I have Chinese relatives, and I talk to my Chinese friends all the time about this sort of stuff. Where the attitude is, as long as you keep your head down, you don't say like certain things. It's broadly understood that the government has your back. Like it's broadly understood that if there's a problem, they're going to fix it, and if they don't fix it, then people do actually end up revolting, right? I mean, this happens with like the Didi drivers as recently as a couple of weeks ago, or it happened with the sanitation workers again a couple of months ago, where like if there's an issue, people understand that there's an issue there, and if it's not being addressed, then they do actually go out and protest, right? And the government actually takes action, both on the little things like fixing a pothole almost instantly, as soon as it's brought up. Like there's this performance aspect to the way that the Chinese government operates at the local level that I think is very interesting, that I think we should be bringing back to the United States of America. That was my main point with CGTN, which was like we should be looking to some of the things that the Chinese government has done that is objectively positive, that actually does make people feel like the government is protecting them, that the government does have their best interest in mind, that actually makes them feel a shared respect for national prosperity, Chinese prosperity in general. And the reason why I don't think we have it as much here in the United States of America is more of a fake patriotism, is because there isn't really much to look forward to as far as like assuming that the government is going to fix any number of different issues that people are experiencing, whether it be the housing crisis that has created almost 1 million homeless people in the wealthiest nation on the planet, or whether it be the concept of medical debt. Now, obviously, medicine and healthcare is one area that is deserving of improvement in China as well. but it's nowhere near as bad as like the unimaginably costly process that exists in the United States of America that has this like explosive parasitic middleman economy, both in every aspect of our lives, but certainly in healthcare as well, in the form of private healthcare insurance providers.
How do you see the relationship between US and China at the moment, and how do you feel like young people like you can actually help in building that bridge that we don't understand each other, I feel.
When it comes to foreign policy, I think the average American's attitude or the average American's opinion is perhaps even almost to the same degree as not relevant as like the average Chinese person's opinion might be on Chinese foreign policy. They can talk about foreign policy, especially when it comes to talking about like the regional actors. I know that was like a big deal when I was in China. Where everyone was talking about Japan after the even more right wing Japanese prime minister came out and really upset the entire Chinese world by reminding everyone the colonial occupation of Taiwan, and saying that they would do that. That kind of stuff obviously is talked about quite a bit, but I think that there's a degree of removal from the average person and like the actual, the standing committee's decisions on foreign policy. And I think in America, we have been taught that we have a say, that we have a democratic say, but it's uniparty. There's broad consensus in American politics in general when it comes to American foreign policy. And so I don't know what I can do as an individual as far as like, changing the trajectory of American foreign policy. I think that's almost impossible. But we can engage in broad awareness initiatives and try to get people to be aware of the actions that the administration is taking. And I think like the conversation and the attitude shift that was so dramatic on Israel and Palestine is a real resilient example that as long as people are steadfast and center victims in their communication and their approach and explain to people over and over again, in spite of all of the the barrage of attacks, the attempts of deplatforming, cancellations, things of that nature. As long as they push through that, and protest and engage in these sorts of broad awareness initiatives, people can actually come to the conclusion. People can actually see the reality of American cruelty, Israeli cruelty, American foreign policy in general.
Do you think more young people, when they listen to you on Twitch, talking about China, sharing your experience in China, could come to be curious about China and the Chinese, and maybe treat their next door neighbor or the next, student sitting next to them, not as a spy or somebody who's a threat to their national security, but some as a human being?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that is my hope. My hope is that we develop a better understanding of other people and recognize that the countries that are our government in the United States of America or the Western governments have presented as foreign adversaries are actually comprised of people with the same exact interests as us. That everyone wants everyone wants an easy life. Everyone wants a fulfilling life, a job, and a roof over their heads, and a hot meal, and clothes on their back in the same exact ways. And I think it's important to stress that and cut through the divisive rhetoric that like there is no reason for the average American to hate China. There's just no reason whatsoever. It's especially silly because I mean, this is our largest trade partner. 30% of all of our commerce comes from China. It's the industrial base of the entire planet at this point. And yet, in spite of all of that, Americans have been taught to hate China, this country that we heavily rely on. And I find that to be not only hypocritical, but also very stupid. And the same goes for Americans that demonstrate hatred towards Iran or Americans that demonstrate hatred towards Venezuela. These countries have done nothing to the United States of America, really. I mean, maybe with Iran, as far as like our interventions and interference in their backyard has caused them to at least every now and then push back militarily. But beyond that, I mean, what has Venezuela ever done? What has Cuba ever done to the United States of America? Nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And yet we still have so much smoke for them. We still have to We still have to constantly intervene in their affairs. We still have to constantly destabilize, constantly cripple their economies. And outside of that, or in a way to justify this constant enforcement of American hegemony all around the world against all of our adversaries that we've declared our adversaries, our enemies, there's a steady flow of propaganda that must come in to get people on board with this kind of cruelty. So they see that as like enemies getting what is due, rather than unnecessary cruelty that we're subjecting random people overseas to.
So what do you feel about, Biden also did that, decouple from China, de-risk from China, move away supply chains from China?
I don't think that we have, I say this both jokingly and also sincerely. In order for America to decouple from China, it must become like China. And what I mean by that is we need central planning instantly. And we have a version of central planning, but the central planning that we have is oftentimes done at the behest of capital and not at the behest of the proletariat. And what I mean by that is the decisions that we're making are not made to inevitably divvy up the profit in some way, shape, or form in robust infrastructure projects or improving American material conditions in a meaningful way, but instead they're given back to shareholders in the form of profit, stock buybacks and numerous other financial tricks that the American capitalists engage in, or global finance engages in, because at this point it's not even, this is a multinational endeavor. So in order for America to turn back that clock, I think they would have to very quickly try to build this industrial base, and that requires tremendous central planning and tremendous control over the American economy. And in the absence of a war economy, America's never really had that. America's never really done that. So not exactly certain as to how we would, decouple from China, but the thing that I want anyway is for America to have a robust industrial base in general, with good workers' protections and good benefits and good jobs in general. We can do that without endless militarism. We can do that without building bombs, but instead, building roads and building houses and building high-speed rail and better methods of travel, or even focusing on renewable energies as the next initiative. And yet, instead of doing any of that, we've decided to try to offshore Chinese development and Chinese projects to other regional, other countries in the region that have that are, I guess, easier to control than China, that have, I guess, less sovereignty, or at least like less room to make sovereign decisions, and hope for the best.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, have a good one.
You too. Bye-bye.